All right, welcome to another IAEI News Live. My name is Thomas Dimitrovich, and with me is Mr. Nehad ElSherif.
Hi, Tom. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you again.
Yes, so why don't you, for all of those who are out there, why don't you introduce yourself?
Right, so my name is Nehad ElSherif. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And Tom is my good friend, and we've been recording some videos. And I guess this is a recording video, but we've done a few lives.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be back on the channel. Thank you, Tom, for having me.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. And this is going to be a Code Making Panel 2. This will be a report on the first revisions.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, what we are going to talk about, just so everybody understands, what we're going to talk about is what occurred at the panel meeting here in Charleston, South Carolina. It may not survive, right? Because it needs to get 2/3. All we needed at the table last week
Simple majority.
was a simple majority. We had 20 voting members sitting at the table, which meant we needed 11 for a simple majority. Some of these changes that we're going to talk about didn't receive 2/3.
It did pass, but because some first revisions were anonymous, which meant that
Anonymous?
Sorry, unanimous. Not
Unanimous.
Unanimous.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, unanimous. So this means that they have high probability of passing because you only need 2/3. But then there are there are quite a few FRs that were very close. We even had a couple of ties.
Yeah, we had some 10-10s, which means it failed. And then we had a motion to resolve or for a first revision, whatever the opposite was. And in some cases, those passed by, maybe it was a 10-9 vote.
One vote.
By one vote. So, and then the survivability of that is minimal. So what we want to do is we want to dig into the key, some of the big changes that passed, again, a simple majority. And we might be able to give some feeling for what we think, what was like unanimous but you'll hear the controversial stuff. And then I want to get into article, this is more of a code making panel 12 discussion. I want to talk a little bit about a new article that I proposed and was passed.
And this just happened this afternoon.
So I want to talk about that a little bit and give you some of the stimulus behind that. And I have a feeling that definitely is going to survive. What it will look like in the second draft or in the final revision for NFPA 70 is still left to be discussed, right? So, all right, so let's talk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk down through, not Electric Avenue, but I'm going to walk down through some of the changes, and we'll start in 210. And when we have to refer back to Article 100, we will. Okay?
Definitions, yeah.
Yeah. So first thing we did, the style manual requires that 210.2 is listing requirements, and 210.3 is reconditioning requirements. Yeah. So what you'll see is that we had to take the existing 210.3, which was other articles for specific purpose branch circuits. Now, what we didn't want to do was have to renumber.
Renumber, yeah.
Right.
Because everyone, I guess we all agree, everyone is so used to 210.10.8 as GFCI's requirements and 210.12 as the AFCI requirements.
Right.
So renumbering would have been very confusing.
Yeah, so what we did was we took the existing 210.3 and we moved it all the way up to 210.14. And I remember in the task group, so remember 210.3 was other articles for specific branch purposes, right? Branch circuits. We moved it right after ground fault protection of equipment in 210.13 and before guest rooms and guest suites.
Just like the open spot.
So it was the first open spot that we could find that would not cause us, that was still in part 1.
Yeah.
General requirements.
And it won't cause any renumbering because this was, I think it was 13 and then we moved to 17 or something.
Yep.
Yeah, so there are 14, 15, 16 were open. And I guess the task group decided to just put it in the first slot.
Now, what I would say is what you'll want to do is watch the words in reconditioned equipment. So the new 210.3, so we took the reconditioned equipment materials, and everybody is going to do this. They're all going to move it to .3.
For consistency.
For consistency and to meet the style manual, right? Yeah. So that you know if there are reconditioning requirements in the chapter or in the article, they're going to be in the .3s. So what I want you to look out for as we move into the second draft and the final is the words that are used, because what we settled on was the following reconditioned equipment shall not be installed. And what was one of the proposals that was reviewed, and we had a debate about this, one of the proposals said the following reconditioned equipment shall not be permitted. Now, permitted is more of a generic term. Installed is very specific. And the argument that was made on why we went with installed was because the National Electrical Code is an installation document. It can't tell you what can be done outside of the code. Or
I guess, in other words, you can recondition a piece of equipment, but as long as you don't install it, then you're not in violation, right? Like
That's right.
Just recondition as much as you want, but you can't install it.
That's exactly
I don't know what's the value, but...
Yep. So and what we added in there was what was already in there was the GFCIs and AFCIs. So, but I'm just going to say, keep an eye on what is the language that we end up. Do we keep shall not be installed, or do we move to shall not be permitted? All right, so that's what we did there. We also, we added, that wasn't big. Let's move down to 210.6, branch circuit voltage limitations. We just reworded some things there. Nothing big deal. We just aligned the limits with the scope of the article. Okay. Let's go straight to 210.8.
Yeah, this is what everybody's waiting for.
That's right. This is what you want to hear, right? So you want to hear, what did panel 2 do in 210.8, ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel? Well, I can tell you, and I think what ruled the discussion, in my opinion, I don't know where your head's at, was compatibility. That was the topic of the day.
And yeah, I totally agree with you, Tom. The big one was the HVAC, the high frequency noise, the dripping class A GFCIs.
Right.
Which
and the exception that's already there.
Yeah, because if you remember from the 2023 NEC, we had expiry date of the exemption to September 1st, 2026. And this was a result of a TIA. It was not any initial code.
Right.
So this was a TIA, and TIA is a tentative interim amendment, which is a process that changes can be made in the National Electric Code in between the cycles. So
that was a TIA.
23 through 20, you don't have to be to something, you have the code 2023, some changes can be made without having to wait till the 2026.
If you're interested in what a TIA is, we have another whole session on that, so you can take a look at that one. I'll try to put the link up above.
That sounds good, yeah. So this was TIA, which simply says that HVAC equipment, and this is 210.8 F, which is the outdoor outlets. So if you have an HVAC,
let's do this. Let's not get to 210.8 F yet. Let's start at the top.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
But this was the big change, but yeah.
Well, that was one of the big changes, right? So, that was a significant change. So the other thing we did. So let's start from the top. We added and we moved an exception that was in other than dwelling units when you have GFCI on a rooftop, and we said that. Remember, the exception said receptacles on rooftops shall not be required to be readily accessible other than from the rooftop. And we had it for 210.8B, but we threw it in for 210.8 in general, just because it doesn't matter, right? If it's on the rooftop, it only has to be readily accessible from the rooftop.
And it doesn't matter if it's a dwelling, a rooftop
Right.
dwelling or non-dwelling. Yeah, it's just and it made sense. I mean,
Right.
the exception, moving the exception to the beginning of the article made a lot of sense.
We didn't change the measurements. The cords, going through the receptacle should follow the piercing the floor walls to do it.
For the first
Nothing
time,
else.
yeah.
No other changes in 210.8 parent text. So let's talk dwelling units. Now, in dwelling units, we did a couple things, and we do have, and I think I have it in here. We have
You're talking about the ballotable detail.
we have ballot. So why don't you tell them about the ballotable details while I look for this?
All right. So a ballotable detail simply, so the way that the NFPA update or the National Electric Code update or the mechanics of how NFPA does it is you're allowed to make one change or one FR, we call, on one section of the code. So if we are updating 210.8A, for example, and we have multiple changes, they all get balloted together. The challenge is if we make multiple changes and ballot, and then a panel member likes some changes and disagrees with other changes, then you'll be facing the situation of you either taking the whole thing, you vote for it, and you get everything, even if the things that you disagree with as a panel member, or you just vote against everything and lose the things that you support. So, and this when we start working, when we kind of know that there's something that will be contentious, they do what we call ballotable detail, which is the mechanism or the process that NFPA has to allow to make multiple changes within the same section of the code that are balloted differently. So on the ballot, when we get to ballot, after the first division report is available or becomes available, which I believe in, do you remember what, May maybe? I can't remember.
So what'll happen is when it goes out to ballot, we will get the ballot and we will see the ballotable details. Nobody in the general public will even know there was a ballotable detail. So it's like a line item veto. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We get 210.8, for example, 210.8A. One of the points of discussion was in 210.8A2, where we have garages and also accessory buildings that have a floor located at or below grade level, not intended as habitable rooms and limited into storage areas, work areas, and areas of similar use. Well, we looked at that and said, that's two separate things. You have garages, and then you have accessory buildings.
Yeah, there's no reason to have
there's no reason to have two of them, right? So what we did was we separated those into two list items. So garages is by itself. So 210.8A 2 is now simply garages. 210.8A3 is now accessory buildings not intended as habitable rooms and limited to storage areas, work areas, and areas of similar use. Well, what we removed was that have a floor located at or below grade level.
And this was the issue. That's why this specific point, the grade level, whether to keep it or take it out or not, this was an issue, and I guess we couldn't get a consensus.
Well, we got consensus.
I mean, we got consensus, but it was close, right? So this was the reason that as panel 2, we decided to have it as a ballotable detail.
I don't know that this was like a 10-9 vote. There was only like a couple people that were arguing for the located at or below grade.
I can't remember. Maybe I have the vote.
I think what we did was we did them all as ballotable details just because we didn't want to lose.
Because some people specifically asked. I remember some of the panel members asked, like, let's just have this ballotable detail so it's not lost.
Correct.
With the other stuff that we kind of more passed unanimously, like just adding nominal to the language or something that no one really had any issue with.
Yeah. So we have in 210.8A 2 and 3, we have garages in 2, we have accessory buildings not intended as habitable rooms and limited to storage areas, work areas, and areas of similar use in 2. That's a ballotable detail if it passes ballot, meaning if it gets 2/3 of a vote. What NFPA does is they lump it into 210.8A. If it doesn't, then you won't see it in 210.8A. So you'll know whether or not the code panel did anything in 210.8A2 if you see garages and accessory buildings separated out differently. Because if that ballotable detail fails, then the existing language that's in the code remains.
Yeah, we'll go back to the 2023 language.
Right. Okay, so that was the first change in A. We're not going to talk about B yet. That's a B. This is a B. This is a B, C, and D. What's this one? There's the F. What's this one? That's exception number three. That's a B. So what's this one? And this is.
I don't know if there's anyone.
This is actually the parent text of 210.8. All right, so we did make another change. So this one here was very controversial. In fact, it failed and then it was reopened at the panel.
Yeah.
And what failed about it was there was a public input that said the parent text of 210.8 would say a listed Class A-HF GFCI shall provide protection in accordance with A through F of 210.8. Now, the panel said, no, we don't want, this would mean you could not use a Class A.
Yeah.
So we resolved the HF, and what HF is a high frequency GFCI, which is not in a standard yet. There's no standard for the product.
It's still a proposal.
There's a proposal, but there's no standard for the product.
No.
It's a concept that needs to be agreed upon by the standard, the technical panel for UL 943. Now, we had the debate and we ended up putting it in as an or. So the way, if this passes, which I don't know, it was very close vote. If this HF, Class A HF GFCI passes, then it will say a listed Class A or Class A HF GFCI shall provide protection in accordance with 210.8A through F.
Yeah.
So now you have the choice of using a Class A or is this Class A HF, which is supposed to resolve any of the high frequency stuff.
Yeah, I guess we should maybe share a little bit more the proposal, because it's not really a product yet or a standard. Like you can't buy this yet, like it's not even available. Yeah. So the idea is with the HF is to have a Class A or a device that has all the features of a Class A GFCI, meets all the requirements of UL 943, which is the UL standard for listing GFCIs, Class A, but with the added feature that this Class AHF will be able to reject, like just does not operate in the presence of high frequency. I believe it's up to 150 kilohertz. So it kind of helps with the interoperability. So if you have high frequency noise in your circuit, this device is supposed to inhibit its operation, doesn't trip.
But the scope of what it doesn't look at is still not defined.
Not defined. It's still fluid.
Yeah, so that's all still fluid. So, and I think that what the panel wanted to do was just get this out there for review by all of you out there and manufacturers and anybody who is interested in and applies the Class A GFCI in all of these applications in A through F of 210.8 as an option that if you have an incompatibility with a Class A GFCI, that you can fall back on a Class A HF.
When it becomes available.
If it's available and when it becomes available. So that you're not falling back to a standard thermomagnetic circuit breaker. So it's sort of a stopgap measure from a compatibility concern.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I heard differences of opinion on the compatibility stuff. So that's still something else that needs to be reviewed and agreed upon by the industry.
And I guess with this FR, we have a companion FR for a definition, because now Class A.
And that didn't pass.
So, I think we opened it. This is what we were discussing this afternoon.
This is the one we opened, and I looked through all of the valuable details. The definition has not been added.
Okay, because I couldn't
It's not
remember.
available
My
detail.
notes, I didn't finish my notes, but so what do you feel? Because I voted against this during the panel meeting. Again, my vote is directed. It's 100% IEEE. Tom's vote is also NEMA, so it's a directed vote. But I don't know what you think personally, because I'm personally not a fan of adding a requirement in the code that doesn't exist yet. Not that I'm against the concept. I'm on the task group that is working on this proposal. We've been working on this for, I don't know, 5-6 years now. But it's been very progress has been very slow. So I support the concept, but I don't support adding it into the National Electric Code until we have something. That's just my personal opinion. So
Excellent. Yeah, so there's the special purpose GFCI.
I remember that.
There's the
definition,
GFCI, so it is not in the ballotable detail.
So the definition failed.
Yeah, and that's okay, because then we would have to just add it, and it wouldn't be new material because it was a public input.
Yeah.
So we would have to resurrect it, even if
this passes.
it even passes if it gets 2/3, and then even if it gets 2/3 in the second draft. If we get to the second draft and there's no product, no standard, I don't know how we would keep it in.
Yeah.
Because it would be another product that we, unless you put a enforceable, to be enforced January 1st of 2029.
And this was an idea.
I don't know how you would do
remember during the discussion, someone proposed an effective date. The problem is we don't know when this thing is going to come to effect. Could it be like, let's say, have an effective date?
But remember,
in 2027.
Not putting an effective date is putting an effective date of January 1st, 2026.
Yeah, I guess once this code becomes available, and then the states would have to adopt it, and it depends when they adopt it, right? Because some states would maybe start using
the moment they adopt it. If it is after January 1st, 2026, you have put an effective date in. So in any case, we'll see if it survives. Class A, HF. All right, so that was that change. That was in the parent text. Now in A, what did we have in A?
I tend to think that this was the big one. I can't remember anything else.
We already talked about the separation, right? Yeah. So let's go back to 210.8. We already talked about A, 2, and 3, the garages and accessory buildings. We also split out indoor, remember it said indoor damp and wet locations. And the problem with damp and wet locations is you can't have a damp and wet location. It's either a damp or wet location. We fixed that in 210.8B, but we didn't fix it in A. I don't know how that happened. So right now what we did to solve the problem and the debate of and or, I said, why don't we just create 2 line items? One is an indoor damp location, and the other is an indoor wet location. But we screwed up because I see indoor damp, and then 13 says indoor wet locations. So I think that either NFPA staff still has to make some modifications to this, but our intent was 12 to be an indoor damp location and 13 to be an indoor wet location.
I think you said you were going to review your notes and comments, because if this was the request of a task group 1, which Tom chaired, then I guess it would be editorial. But I mean, the thing is, it's not the end of the day, because we still have the public comment stage. And this will be picked up during the public comment stage.
So the other change that we did was in exception number 4, where it said factory installed receptacles that are not readily accessible and are mounted internally to bathroom exhaust fan assemblies shall not require GFCI protection. And what we said there was, we don't care if it's a bathroom exhaust fan, if it's a laundry exhaust fan, if you have a receptacle integral to an exhaust fan, that receptacle is to serve the motor in that exhaust fan, so you don't need to GFCI protect it because it's not going to be used for anything else. So we remove the word bathroom, and it just says factory installed receptacles that are not readily accessible and are mounted internally to exhaust fan assemblies shall not require GFCI protection.
I remember this was an interesting conversation because it made perfect sense to me. If it's an exhaust fan, it's an exhaust fan. Why are we limiting it to bathrooms? Like if you have an exhaust fan in the kitchen, for example, or somewhere else in the dwelling unit, it's still an exhaust fan.
Yep.
The existing code says bathrooms only.
A bathroom exhaust fan is something you would use in the bathroom, but if you wanted to put an exhaust in any room, the instructions don't say you shall only install this in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right. So we clarified that.
The location doesn't matter. Yeah.
And that really expands the exception for GFCI for those types of equipment. All right, so now that was all we did in 210.8A for dwelling units. Now in 210.8B, we did the separation of indoor damp locations and indoor wet locations, so that we did. We also fixed, now this one here was
Exception, right?
controversial. And it's other than dwelling units, and what I want to do is call up NFPA link, because here was the issue. And you know what was funny was this was my task group, and when it came up at the table, I was a little unprepared, because when I looked at the language, and so what happens is the chair says, task group 1 chair, does task group 1 make a motion? And then I would say, Mr. Chair, task group 1 wants to make a motion of a first revision with the language that's on the screen and the substantiation on the screen, and that would be a motion, because you don't need a second, because the task group brought that to the table. And then the chair says, all right, we have a motion on the table, Mr. Dimitrovich. And then I'm supposed to describe what the change is and have a discussion. So I'm supposed to describe, here's what we did. And I was like, what was it, right? So, and I remember when we had this discussion, it was like it hit me when I read what was there. The suggestion from the submitter was to just delete the exception. But I couldn't get the task group, I chaired the task group, so the task group did not want to do that. So, and I'm going to read you what it said previously in 210.8B, exception number, that's A. Here it is, exception number 3. So here's what it said. Exception number 3 that was changed in the 2023 cycle. Receptacles or cord and plug connected fixed and stationary appliances installed within 6 foot from the top inside edge of a bowl of a sink shall not be required to be GFCI protected in industrial establishments, where the condition of maintenance and supervision ensure that only qualified personnel are involved, and an assured equipment grounding conductor program in accordance with 590.6b2 shall be permitted, not required, right? Or only those receptacle outlets used to supply equipment that would create a greater hazard. So they had this big discussion about what is a greater hazard, right? So what we did in that exception was we said, no, we didn't.
I think we went back to the 2020 language.
Well, but I'm looking at this, and
This is what we did.
was it available detail?
Because I remember clearly that we decided to delete this exception and go back to the 2020 language.
Yes, we did. So that was the 2023 language. The 2020 language was different, but let me look at the ballotable detail Word documents, because I think we made it a ballotable detail because here we did.
Right there, yeah.
Here it is. Here it is. I'm looking at this. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
No. All right. So here was. So we went from a receptacle or cord and plug connected fixed and stationary appliances within 6 foot of a sink to at industrial establishments where conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure that only qualified personnel are involved. If a greater hazard is created by power interruption to outdoor fixed and stationary cord and plug connected equipment, or that has a design that is not compatible with GFCI protection, and a short equipment grounding conductor program in accordance with 590.6b2 shall be implemented and enforced in lieu of GFCI protection provided at the receptacle outlet. So what we did there was we said, look, it's not about is the receptacle within 6 foot of a sink. that takes out a lot of receptacles. And I was like, I can't believe we put that in, right? And then everybody was scratching their head, even on the task group. So what I did was I went back and looked at the history. Somehow we got rid of the existing and we put in this other, which really, I mean, it looks a little bit like what was there in the 2020 code, but when you go from only outdoor outlets to all receptacles within 6 foot of a sink, that's huge.
It's a big difference.
That's a big difference.
It is.
So what we did was we, as a task group, and then the committee agreed, and I asked that this be a ballotable detail. I know Charlie Boynton had some concerns about it, and he wanted to read through it a little bit further. So I said, look, let's make it a ballotable detail. If the industrials have an issue with this, let them bring, they can vote against it and put a ballot statement that says, here's why, here's my issue with this. So what we have now is we went back to the 2020 code, but we made it better because the 2020 code said the assured equipment grounding program was optional.
Optional, yeah. And remember, this is 210.8B, which is non-dwelling or other than dwelling units, not at your dwelling unit at home.
Right.
Yeah, for industrial application.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there we go. Oh, that was your text that finally came in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This is like two hours ago or something. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that's what we did in 210.8B, exception number 3. So you're going to see that one. That I think was.
No, I guess they won't see it unless it passes ballot. Yeah.
I have a feeling, though. Here's my thoughts.
It should pass.
The only one who even questioned it was Charlie Boynton, who represents the American Chemistry Council. And that's one of the reasons why I said, look, Charlie was like, I could tell he was like really looking at it, trying to understand. And I said, look, I know what's going to happen. Charlie's going to go back. He's going to read through this. If he has concerns.
And he will share it with the American Chemistry Council because that's a directed vote.
That's exactly right. So what they'll do is they'll come up with, if they vote against it, as a ballotable detail, they'll have to put a ballot statement in, and their ballot statement should say why they don't agree with changing exception 3. And that would give all of us you never know. I mean, that's the value of having all of these different people at the table.
Because they're definitely, if they have concerns, it's probably not going to, you and I won't have the same concerns. So it's nice to get their perspective because
Absolutely.
They have different application. I mean, this is kind of what they live and breathe every day. It's not something that we do. Not something I deal with every day. So.
Yeah. So, okay. So that was the one change. And then receptacles. So we just cleaned up some of the other exceptions. We just cleaned up for the style manual. So we didn't make any other major changes in 210.8B that I could find.
And I would say this 2020 cycle is one of the very few cycles that we didn't really make major changes in 210.8, with the exception of F, which we're going to discuss.
We're going to get there.
All the changes are just very, there was no expansion to any new locations, nothing very controversial other than just little things here and there. The grade level.
Like in 210.8C, for example, the only change we made in 210.8C was to add the word nominal. Yeah. So remember, C is crawl spaces. So GFCI protection shall be provided for lighting outlets not exceeding 120 volts nominal installed in crawl spaces.
And in this cycle, we added nominal everywhere.
A bunch of locations.
And it's very straightforward just to be consistent with other sections of the code. Just add 120 volt nominal.
And 210.8D. So 210.8D, specific appliances. We didn't add any specific appliances. We didn't subtract any specific appliances. And what we did was we did say the parent text of D, we said GFCI protection shall be provided for branch circuit or outlet supplying the following appliances rated 150 volts or less to ground and 60 amps or less, which was there, single phase, and we added 100 amps or less, 3-phase. So we brought in the 100 amps or less, which aligns with 210.8B, where we have the 100 amps or less 3-phase.
And again, this was just for consistency. So it was something that was done last cycle in B, I believe. So
Yes.
now we're doing the same thing in D, just to be consistent.
Yeah, yep. So we pulled that in now, and that was the only thing we did in 210.8D. Now in 210.8E, equipment requiring servicing, we didn't do anything. Then touch 210.8E. F. Let's talk about F.
Yeah.
Now, 210.8F is your outdoor outlets, and a lot of people make the common mistake of thinking 210.8F is just for HVAC
No,
equipment.
so the HVAC definitely had been
Impacted.
the industry has been mostly impacted. They've been doing a lot of going back and forth, TIAs and amendments, and even going to the NEC Council, Standard Council. But yeah, there anything powered through an outlet,
Yes.
outdoor outlet, would be covered in 210.8F.
Now, one of the things we did was we took the 50 amps or less and raised that to 60 amps or less. And again, for consistency.
This was just, remember that one? That was an interesting one. We couldn't just why did we put the 50 and then make it to 60?
So we had
This was an
that
interesting discussion.
And you know what? That is a good. It's very important to take good notes each cycle so that you can go back and say, oh, here's why we did 50 instead of 60. Now, remember, panel 2 has a lot of new members on it. So we have representatives from the appliance industry, from the HVAC industry. We have an additional inspector, I believe, an inspector member on there, right?
There's a new inspector, a new users, a couple
new users as well.
And then there's ACCA now is representing.
That's right, ACA.
It's American Air Conditioning Contractors of America.
Yeah, that's
right?
Yep.
ACCA, yeah.
Yep. So what we did in F, we have a couple ballotable details. The 50 to 60 was a ballotable detail because it was a little, I can't even remember if it was a close vote. I just knew that it was a controversial topic.
No,
we had a lot of debate.
If you remember, this is the one that the resolve failed, the FR failed, and then I proposed getting rid of the whole current thing. No one voted for me. Yeah, these guys ditched me. I made a motion and no one supported me. So I started my own club that no one votes for me. You remember that?
Yeah.
And then we had to go back because the thing is,
there were numerous times
we couldn't agree
during the voting sessions. Like Nehad would vote, and I would go, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" And then, you know what?
We're sitting next to each other.
We're sitting next to each other. But I'll tell you what. You know what's interesting is everybody has a different opinion on things, and you had your opinion, and you were very strong. I was like, I'm like, no way am I voting for that.
So when I made this proposal or motion, guess who seconded me? This guy. Well, he's second.
Well, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. When you have someone who makes a motion, there's this awkward moment of silence, right? And here's my opinion. Even if I disagree with the motion, which I did, right? But I wanted to hear the discussion. He made the motion. I'm looking around. Nobody's seconding it. I'm like, you know what? I want to hear this discussion. So I seconded it. And then we had the debate. And now it didn't survive, right? But we had the discussion. Yeah, and I think that's an important part of the process. You don't have to agree with everything, but it's important to hear other people's perspectives. So I wanted to hear your perspective. And I didn't agree with you. So I apologize.
I believe that increasing the 50, I don't have to apologize, but the 50, increasing the 50, I mean, moving from 50 to 60 with your PI, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was I believe it was my PI, and because I said, look, we have a lot of 60. I mean, we said outdoor outlets. We have pool pumps. We every day of the week, twice on Sunday. We have 60 amp pool pump, pool pump control panels, and whatnot. So 60 amps was the logical choice, and it aligned with other areas in the code. So we said, let's just move this to 60 to be, because the hazard doesn't exist at 60. It exists at 50, and they go, oh, well, put a 60 amp circuit in, and now you don't have to do this. It doesn't make sense to me. And that was your point. But your point was, what ampere value does it?
Yeah, my point is that's my point. We should be consistent with 210.8A and B, because remember,
there's a mistake. 210.8B doesn't have all. 210.8b, let's read
It used to say 15 and 20 amp.
No, it says now 60 and 100 three-phase. So if you would have made...
Oh, sorry, I mean A. A used to say 10 and 15.
That's right. So we have a difference between A and B. B has the limits. A doesn't. And I think the reason that is because you're not going to find a 100 amp three-phase branch circuit in a dwelling unit. And if you do, God bless you. Okay?
Yeah, what are you going to do with that much current?
Because residential dwelling units don't have that much of a... But when we got to the outdoor outlets, if you would have said 60 amps or less and a single phase and 100 amps or less three-phase, now I think you would have gotten more people on board because we've already accepted it in specific appliances and in B.
Does it say 60?
Other than dwelling units is 50 or less. We got to change that to 60.
Yeah, and you know where these numbers came from?
No.
2017 cycle when there was a special for GFCI, which was my proposal. This was put in and then taken out.
All of this mess,
history,
all of this mess
because of me
is right there.
I'm taking the blame.
You're taking the blame. So the 50 in B should really be 60 to align up with D. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm making a public comment. That should line up with D, and then F lines up. And F should be 60. So it should be, and we changed it to 60. So it should be on B, D, and F, in my humble opinion, should all line up. And I would throw in the three-phase in F as well. Now, if you would have done that, I think that would have gotten legs. But you said, I don't care what the amps are. I don't care what phase it is.
I think it goes back to the rating of the available products. This is the reason for those cars. Like it doesn't.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't affect safety. Like if at the end of the day.
And if you don't have a solution for GFCI at those voltage and current values, then you have a code requirement that cannot be enforced.
Product availability is the determining factor, but I guess my concern was having those numbers in the code may cause someone who's not very familiar with the theory or the physics behind it to think that the hazard doesn't exist when there's more than 16 amp, which is not true, which is not what we're trying to say.
I have respect for that. I have respect for your position on that, but the reason you got zero support.
I was like, I guess I have to. I guess my emotion, because I made a motion. I was looking around the room. No one is, and I didn't expect it to pass, but I thought I would get maybe a couple votes supporting me.
No,
zero
crickets. It was crickets.
So the running joke was I started my own club.
Yeah, it was the Nehad Club. All right, so F. So one of the changes again was 50 to 60. Now, the other change was, in my opinion, this was big. It was a very important moment for me because when we talked to the HVAC people, and the one guy there was from Carrier, right? And he is now in the Carrier Hall of Fame, which is a very highly prestigious award in the Carrier family, I guess it would be, right, for that company. And he was very proud of that. He was very happy with that, and I was very happy for him.
I'm not sure if he works for Carrier, because he was the one representing the ACCA. So I'm not sure, but he got this recognition.
Thing. It's a Carrier thing.
So it might be something you do for the industry.
So if anybody out there knows about what the Carrier Hall of Fame is, we have somebody on panel 2 who's going to be inducted this year. So in any case,
interesting you got the email
what I was really happy with, what really, it's like when you have another person that you think you're going to upset because you either said something or did something, and you talk to that person and they go, no, I'm not upset. In fact, we are thinking alike. And it's like a weight off your shoulder. I was nervous. Honestly, personally, I was very nervous about how do we work together, right? Is it going to be an environment of arguing back and forth that no GFCI, yes GFCI, no GFCI, and nobody's moves, right?
Yeah.
So when I made the public input, which I didn't think would pass at all, I had an effective date that I wanted to push out.
2029, I think it was.
I was 2020. I honestly, I screwed up the PI. It was a last minute thing. I was trying to get a few individuals close to me to support what I wanted to do, and I got the nods, and I got the right people from an industry perspective that said, you know what, it has merit, let's do it. And then I made the public input, and I messed up the language. So I had to at the table, and if I wasn't at the table, I would have made a specific trip to present to the code panel to explain what I really meant as opposed to what I wrote. And what I wanted was, after the expiration date of exception number 2, I wanted to say, look, from here on in, you can use a special purpose GFCI that's set to trip at the 20 milliamp threshold, which is based upon the definition. And that should give you the breathing room so that if you have an appliance that is not compatible, right now, the exception lets you go back to a standard thermomagnetic circuit breaker. And I have heartburn
No
with that.
protection at all there.
You have zero
No personal
protection.
No personal. And to your point, Tom, I just wanted to comment on this. Tom mentioned that he was very concerned, and it's like this heavy weight that was taken off your chest.
Yes.
And the reason for this, for those who are not, I guess they do not have the background, this has been a sticking issue and it's been going on since the 2020 cycle.
Right.
I guess it was actually 2018 when this first became when the public started knowing, not the public specifically, the HVAC industry found out that this is a no requirement, because we had a program on this, that specifically the 210.8F.
Right.
And again, it was my public comment, so I'm taking blame for that one too. This was, people would say to me or to Tom that GFCIs have created a problem. And in fact, they haven't. They uncovered.
They have identified an issue
that has been there for many, many years. Because remember, those HVAC.
And you know what I would say is, I don't know if I guess you could say that there hasn't been a I'll call it a traffic cop, right? To say you can't use the equipment grounding conductor for certain currents. I think that two things. Over the years, we've probably changed technology to a point that the equipment grounding conductor has become more important. And the program that we did a presentation at the NFPA annual meeting, remember?
Yep.
And we made the point in that presentation to say, look, if you think about dryers, we never pulled a neutral to a dryer. We pulled 2 hots. And then all of a sudden, someone in the dryer industry said, you know, when you open that door, I want a little light to come on. And that's a 120 volt thing. And maybe it was electronics. I don't know what the actual thing was, but somebody decided to put a load line to ground because they didn't have a neutral. And then we said, no, we're going to require that you pull a neutral, and then the appliance has to use that neutral. So we changed that. We did the same change in the lighting controls, the occupancy sensors. We require you to pull a neutral down because you may replace that light switch with an occupancy sensor that uses the neutral. So we want it to be there. So I think this is the same.
It should go down the same path, but I guess the industry, HVAC industry specifically, is not quite ready yet.
Right, and I understand that too. So we talk, but here's the other, this is what was so cool, was I sat down with, in the discussions, debate, even at the table and even over the coffee pot, we talked about, what about pulling a neutral? And they were like, we would be open to that. Because what does that do? It makes everybody pull the neutral. I wouldn't be like saying, if you made an HVAC unit, I made an HVAC unit, and it would say, well, you have to pull a neutral. I don't. Now you're at a disadvantage and I'm at an advantage. So what they're saying is, well, we want protection. Right. And they even said, hey, will the special purpose work? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure. I said, I have a very high confidence, and so did other people have a high confidence.
But not the whole.
But they said, let's get it out there and let's do some testing between first draft and second draft. Let's see if this stuff works. Yeah. And the likelihood is very high that you're not going to have any issues with it. So
I don't know. I don't share the same faith, Tom, because back in the day I tested these special purpose GFCIs, as you may know, and the thing is, it's just like a Class A when it trips when the current that it measures is 6 milliamp. And it doesn't have to be 60 hertz. This is what people sometimes
But
overlook.
this isn't a class A.
Yeah, but
This is 20
my
million.
point is class C and D will be the same thing. If the all
4 to 6 milliamp?
If no 20 milliamp, if all the
Right.
current going through the equipment ground and conductor because of all the high noise and EMI filters and all these high noise adds up to more than 20 milliamp, it will trip.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
But the industry is saying that they're going to keep it below 20 milliamps.
Yeah, but if what I mean is if we install them today, it would solve some problems, but not all the problems, unless the HVAC industry makes some change on their end.
Yeah.
And my point is, if it goes in,
And that's what I said.
now,
We need to do some testing to
2026,
see. It will probably solve a majority of the issues.
And to your point, when you talked about pulling motor for the dryers and other applications,
Yeah.
if you think of it, this is the HVAC industry for years, and I guess it just went under the radar. They're using the equipment guard and conductor as a return path, which
Right.
is not supposed to be. The equipment guard and conductor is only for ground fault currents,
Right. No.
not for
When you said you tested these in the past, you tested them with HVAC
not
goods?
with HVAC, but with
what?
VFD. It was like
just-
motors that
okay.
having a variable frequency drives, which is the main issue because of the energy efficiency.
How much current did you see over the equipment grounding conductor?
More than 50 milliamp.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why I don't have a lot. It will solve. Remember, we had this discussion, I think, with
Yeah.
the gentleman from GE Appliances, one of our making panels. He said maybe it will solve 90% of the problems, but he acknowledged that it won't solve all of them. And I said,
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, but I can't say it will solve 90% or 10% of the problems. It will solve some. I'm not arguing this. It would definitely using special purpose GFCIs will solve some of the problems. But whether it's going to be 90%, 10%,
That's what we have to
15%,
determine.
yeah, we still don't know. It will solve. It will help. But my point is, just be prepared that the problems are not going to go away if we keep
Right.
doing what we're doing today.
Yeah.
This is my point.
The standards for the HVAC
Yeah,
products
if
are
everything
changing.
stays the same, with the
Right.
exception of adding special
Right.
purpose GFCIs, we're still going to have some problems. Maybe not as many
Yeah.
problems, but I can say if it's going to be only 50% success, 20%, 90%, no one knows.
So any assumption, you can't even say we're going to have a problem
No.
because we don't know. We have to do testing.
Well, it's just still.
All right.
But
So,
it's, I think
in
I
any
agree
case-
with you, it's a step in the right
yep.
direction.
So the language that we arrived on, and the reason I was very elated with this was because the HVAC industry said, look, we're not interested in removing GFCI in the shock protection. We just want things to work.
Yep.
So they entertained this, and what we passed was effective September 1st, 2026, GFCI or SP GFCI protection shall be provided for listed HVAC equipment. And what that does is it gives you the option to fall back on a device that is still shock protection because it's defib. The difference between a special purpose and the GFCI Class A and the Class C is that the Class A is a protection from let go and a pickup level at the let go threshold. That's the other thing. It's just the pickup. So if the special purpose picks up at 20 milliamps and the GFCI picks up at 4 to 6 milliamps, you have a difference of, say, 6 milliamps to 20 milliamps, that if you had current in that region, that is when you may not be able to let go.
Yeah.
So
this is when a class
GFCI only the pickup point and beyond that it fills that window so that you can let go so you don't get hung up.
It's like the same concept of inrush current. You just we move the pickup from 6 milliamp to
Yes.
20 milliamp to try to override some of the noise.
Exactly.
But anything 20 and above, the two devices are exact same performance. That you use the same curve,
Right.
the same time characteristics. So let's say you have a ground fault at 50 milliamp.
Yep.
A Class A and a Class C deal, what we call special purpose GFCIs, would support, if they're listed devices, because I'm not talking about something that's not listed.
Right.
Both
All
of
right.
them
We
are
got to
listed.
move on. Yeah.
They would just be
Okay. So
from the same.
we have to we're not going to get through all of 210. We'll probably get through 210.8 because We've been talking for an
Yeah,
hour. So-
I guess I lost track of time.
Yeah, we got too much detail.
Since
All right.
we were
So
wondering.
what else now? We got to get off of 210.8F. That's the major change in 210.8F. Let's talk about. So those are the changes on GFCI 210.8. Let's hit. Let's see. Let's go 210.12,
and we have 13. It's a big one too, right?
No, we're not going to get to that. We spent too much time on 210.8. All right, but that's okay. Hopefully you got something out of that discussion. 210.11, just adding the word nominal. 210.12, what did we do there? Okay, so we had some ballotable details there too. So we got into the discussion from a compatibility perspective. There were a few items that just got a 10-9 vote. So one of the things we did in 210.8, in A, we just cleaned up some words. Didn't make any changes. We just reworded some things. In B, we inverted the list. I think the big change in B was instead of having the laundry list of areas, we just said all 120-volt single-phase 10, 15, and 20-ampere branch circuits supplying outlets or devices shall be protected by any of the means described in A1 through A6, period. So that sort of implies expansion to all circuits. But we put an exception in for garages. That got pretty good support. That was very healthy. There was only like 4 people that voted against that. Now, then what we did, and I'm saying 4 or 5. It was a small number. It was, I believe.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It would not have prevented the 2/3. Now, then what happened was they reopened, and in the exceptions they added laundry areas and kitchens. So they added those 2 areas that have been a part of 210.12 for a while, but they added those 2, and those 2 passed by 10-9. 10 in favor, 9 against, 1 abstention. So it didn't get, now if it would have been a 10-10, it would have failed. And then we would have had to, it wouldn't have had to have another motion because that was a committee public input, right? So they added in the exceptions, laundry and kitchens. And they also have an exception number 4, AFCI protection shall not be required for listed HVAC equipment.
So that was interesting.
Now, so I struggled with that one. This is on 10, 15, and 20 amp circuits. I'm not sure what listed AC equipment would be on a 10, 15, or 20 amp circuit.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there are any AC like they're very small. And this was not based on any public input. This was just thrown in during the discussion. I disagreed with it, and I didn't think it would get any support. But I was shocked when, like Tom said, 10-9 or something.
But it was
very,
so
very close.
Those exceptions, the laundry areas, kitchens, and the listed HVAC equipment got just enough for a simple majority. So now the challenge is going to be, that's not a ballotable detail issue. So we'll probably lose all of these changes if it doesn't pass ballot. But if it passes ballot, then and honestly, I'm almost thinking I would support it so that we get it out there and then we make changes in the second draft. But to address any of the concerns. But I don't know how everybody's going to vote. Yeah, and even how I'm going to get directed to vote from NEMA.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
And then 210.8C, we changed dormitory units to dormitories because we changed the definition. We didn't change anything else in there. We did have ballotable details, though. Hold on, let's take a look. We added nominal. That was, I don't know why we did that as a ballotable detail. That's the only change we did in that ballotable detail.
I think this was a mistake. If I remember correctly, this was probably a mistake.
And then we had
because it was done after the fact.
We removed the date until January 1st for the welding equipment. We just said AFCI protection shall not be required for the individual branch circuit supplying an outlet for arc welding equipment in dwelling units. So anyway, that's what we did there. That's a ballotable detail.
Yeah.
And then in 210.12, we also just, that was just, I don't know why that was a ballotable detail, but we removed where it says, for example, arc fault circuit protection shall be installed in accordance with 210.12B through E by any of the means described in 210.12. And it said A1 through A6, and we just said by any of the means described in 210.12A, period. So we got rid of the A1 through 6 because it doesn't matter. So we didn't effectively, that's really not controversial, but it's a ballotable detail. Those were the only ballotable details in 210.12.
So editorial stuff.
All right, so you said, so 210.17 was the important one?
13.
Yeah, that one, that's going to be driven by 10.
Yeah.
Panel 10. 210.17, we added dormitories.
Yeah, the big one here, I think it was 22 or 23. Remember when we had a task group to rewrite the code for the 10 amp branch circuits? What is permitted to be supplied by 10 amp branch circuits? I think it was 23 or 22. I can't remember.
Yeah, but that 17, we added dormitories. Yeah. And in 22, so here's what we did there.
210.22.
So remember, we had in 210.23 permissible loads, multiple outlet branch circuits. On that was a list item that said an individual branch circuit serving a fireplace. So I think it was one of the submitters pointed out that, wait a second, in a section titled multiple outlet branch circuits, you have a requirement around individual branch circuits, which is really the purview of 210.22, which is permissible loads on individual branch circuits. So what we did was we deleted that reference to a gas fireplace unit, and we said, and really it's not a gas fireplace that is the concern, it's the receptacle that you plug the igniter into. So what we did in 210.22 was we added an exception. A 10 ampere individual branch circuit shall not be permitted to supply a receptacle outlet. That covers anything because there's no 10 amp receptacle, right? So then in 210.23, instead of saying what shall and shall not be on a 10 amp circuit, because that leaves a lot to be desired with regard to, I don't know what what about, I don't know, what about that chair? I have a 10 amp chair I need to chair, and it's not in the what can and it's not in the what cannot. So can I? I don't know. So we removed the loads not permitted, and we just focused on loads that are permitted. If it's not on the list of loads that are permitted, then you can't.
I mean, it's like Jeff Sargent said, it's just better code language. Better code language. Just makes it easier, clear. Absolutely. You don't have to say what is permitted, what's not permitted. If it's not on the list, like Tom said, then it's not permitted. Yeah. It's simple.
Yep. All right. So so you'll see some changes in 210.22 and 23 to address that.
And then I guess the next big thing is 210.52.
Oh yeah, let's hit that, and then we'll call it.
Take a long time, yeah.
We're over an hour right now, so what we'll do is we're going to talk about 210.52C, because I know everybody's probably wondering, what did Panel 2 do about 210.52C? So what we did in C was we said, drum roll please, islands and peninsulas, countertops. So this is C2. If provided to serve an island or peninsula countertop or work surface, receptacle outlets shall be installed in accordance with 52C3 and 4. We added a new 4. If a receptacle outlet is not provided to serve an island or peninsula countertop or work surface, electrical provisions shall be provided at the island or peninsula for future addition. That didn't change. So the only change we did in 2 was to reference C3 and a new C4. And what the new C4 is, receptacle outlet locations that are prohibited. Required and permitted receptacle outlets shall not be installed on cabinet sides or wall surfaces that are below countertops and work surfaces. Required and permitted receptacle outlets shall not be installed on adjacent walls extending from the base cabinets within 24 inches horizontally and downward from the countertop and work surface edge within 24 inches vertically. So what this is trying to do is say, look, if you have a countertop, or we said what, countertop? Cabinet sides or wall surfaces, required permitted, any of those, and we're in what, C3. So C is countertops and work surfaces. So if you have a receptacle outlet that is within, that's on the wall of the cabinet of the island or peninsula, you cannot install it. You cannot have a receptacle. Basically, what we're saying is if the receptacle is within 24 inches of the top of the countertop or work surface, then it's there to serve the countertop or work surface, and we don't want it there. So you're prohibited from putting a countertop or work surface, a receptacle in that space on the walls of the countertop or work surface. And we have two exceptions. Receptacle outlets installed in a drawer shall be permitted to be installed below countertops or work surfaces. So the discussion there are these cabinet makers that you have in the drawer, you pull the drawer out, and there might be a USB receptacle in there.
Drawer receptacle, yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that you could still put that in there so you can, throw your cell phones and do your charging. And the other exception is receptacle outlets located in the specified location in A3 shall not be located within 24 inches of the countertop or work surface. So, and that's the A23, or to the A23. You know what? And I think, I think we deleted that. So that exception really doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah. So we have some cleaning up to do in second draft, but key things are, A, they're still optional in islands and peninsulas, and B, we now added clarity on the fact that a receptacle that's within 24 inches of a countertop is meant to serve the countertop, and we don't want it there.
And Tom, I was wondering why we picked 24 inches, and someone told me with the experience, because this is not really something I've experienced with, that this is the typical length of the cord of an appliance.
Yeah.
So it's like 2 feet. That's why 24 is the limit. Because if you want, I think it was initially 18 during the discussion, and then it was, why we're stopping at 18 inches, now it's 24. I was like, why would 18, 24? So apparently this is the standard length of the cord.
That's right.
For any appliance that you'd be powering, using like a boiler or heater or whatever.
Yeah. So those were the changes in 210. What we didn't get to was 220. Just off the top of my head, what were a couple of the big things in 220?
The energy management stuff, like the.
Yeah, we made some changes for energy management, but there was something else that.
And then there was a whole bunch of requests from the National Berkeley National.
Oh yeah, we adjusted.
There's a lot of changes.
Yeah, we adjusted. They wanted demand factors.
Yeah. And
the VA per square foot we modified in the table for
different locations in 220.
Yeah, it was the dwelling unit VA per square foot went from 3 to 2, I think, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, we moved that down to 2 VA per square foot. And there were a bunch of other public inputs that didn't make it, but we gave the submitter enough information to say, hey, you need to go back and do some more homework.
More information.
Yeah.
Or more data.
So I think those were the major items. And what I might do is get Tim McClochie and maybe record one with him for next week. But we can talk about Article 220 next time. And I didn't get to talk about my new article that I proposed that passed. Yeah. But that is going to give you a reason to come back next week for another IAEI News Live on Tuesday.
Right. I'll probably be watching you from Canada.
You're going to be in Canada?
I'm leaving tomorrow, yeah. I'll take off tomorrow morning.
Oh, yeah. You're going to... I thought you were going to Saskatoon.
I am going to Saskatoon. That's in Canada.
Yeah. Oh, no, Canada. For some reason,
Canada.
You know what I was thinking?
Egypt.
I was thinking Egypt,
no, Canada.
I was thinking you're going back to... I don't know what... When you said Canada, I'm picturing Egypt. Oh, man. It's been a long week.
It's been a long 2 weeks. Yeah,
it's been a long week, I said. It's been a long 2 weeks, yes. A week and a half I've been here. So I
I
drove
got here
down.
Sunday. You get here before me Saturday, right?
I drove down Saturday,
Sunday.
9 hours and 15 minutes from Weirton, West by God,
It's
Virginia,
a long drive.
to this hotel in Charleston, South Carolina, and then I don't drive back until Saturday. This Saturday coming up.
I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm supposed to leave tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. But because of the freezing rain in Chicago, I'm supposed to connect through O'Hare. I had to call Air Canada
Through
to change
O'Hare?
my flight. Yeah, now I'm going back through Newark because there is an advisory because apparently freezing rain, snow in Chicago. And I got this nice email that, hey, there's everything is operating according to plan on time, but you can change your flights for free. And once I
Wow.
get this email, it means that probably not going to go as planned, as scheduled. There'll be delays, cancellations. So hopefully there'll be
And
nothing.
you're flying through Atlanta?
No, Newark.
Oh,
New
Newark,
Jersey. Yeah, so
New Jersey.
United. So
So
here,
wait, so you're going east to go west.
yeah, it's my only option. I have to go through Toronto, and there are no direct flights from
So
here
you're
to
going from
Toronto.
here to Newark, Newark to Toronto,
then
Toronto to
Saskatoon.
Saskatoon.
Yeah, hopefully I get around midnight. Hopefully.
Wow.
Leave here at 11, which is 10 back home. Yeah, it'll be like a 14-hour day.
Wow.
There's connections. But hopefully flights go according to schedule.
Yeah. Well, we'll give it. I hope that you have safe travels back.
Yeah, thank you, my friend. Thanks.
So panel 10 starts on Wednesday.
Yeah,
And,
I missed panel 10, but good luck, guys. I wanted to stay and watch, but I have to leave. I'm going to Orlando actually on Friday night.
Is that right?
Yeah, I have the PCIC winter meeting in
Oh,
Orlando.
wow.
So I'll be back in this area, more south, but in a couple days.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so that was something.
All
But
right.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. All right. So that is our IAEI News Live for this Tuesday. Next week, I will try to do a little bit more on 2026 code cycle. I think talking about the 2026 code cycle, looking at what happened in the first draft meetings here in Charleston, I think that here's my opinion. Some people will say, "Oh, you shouldn't be talking about 2026 code cycle changes because everything is fluid." I mean, everything we talked about just right now could not happen, right? But in my opinion, it tells you where the head of the panel is.
And you know what? I think you'll just make the audience prepared for public comment stage because if any of these changes go through, they can comment on it. Even if they don't go through, we can always go back and get a comment on the public input that was resolved.
That's right. That's another misconception. I've heard people say, well, once this is resolved, then nobody can comment on it. Well, yeah, you can.
You can.
You're commenting on the first draft. You can go back to the public input that failed and say, you know what, I like that language. I'm going to put it back in under my name, and I'm going to reference that public input and say, guys and gals, we need this, and then add to the substantiation that maybe the original submitter didn't provide.
And it's going to be harder to find those PIs, but if you dig, you'll find them. And just a quick example, I know we're over time and we probably want to shut down, but Tom and I talked about the 210.8F. Guess what? It wasn't a public input. It was a public comment that I made. And remember, Tom, I called you back in the day, and we had to recall a PI from a gentleman who had an idea similar to, it wasn't the same, but it was something that I could use as basis because remember, there's new materials not allowed. Like you can, even if you have the best idea in the public comment stage, if it's no material, if it's something that is not related to an FR or a PI that was resolved, something that was, I guess, proposed and during the public input stage, you have to wait for 3 years, period. These are the rules. So sometimes you get an idea, if you can relate it back to any of the maybe resolved PI. This one I did for the 210.8F. So to your point, this is very important because maybe someone is listening now and they have a good idea or something that they can use what we're discussing, even if it fails. Like we talked about some of those.
That's right. That's
very close.
And the very close votes, in my opinion, like for example, some of the exceptions, right? So the exceptions for kitchens and laundry, and those exceptions went in because there's a concern of AFCI compatibility with appliances. And we sat down and said, okay, The fact that it got a simple majority tells me there are enough people around that table that have that concern. So I, as somebody in the electrical industry who might be able to influence activities around more testing or more discussions in between the first draft and second draft, we might be able to bring the right individuals together and say, look, you had this concern and it was around AFCIs. Let's determine, is there a compatibility concern around AFCIs? Is it an AFGF and it's the ground fault that's really doing it? And then if it is the ground fault, let's take a look at this high frequency solution, and does that provide the relief that you need for these appliances? Or we already know that there are changes going on in the appliance standards, and you may arrive upon a different solution so that in the second draft, the concerns aren't on the table anymore, right? And in my opinion, if you have those types of close votes, if you don't try to address them, they will keep coming back, and then individuals feel like their voice isn't being heard. Yeah, but it is heard, right? So I like. Totally. I think that we don't always have to agree, and I think that when we disagree, the journey to agreement is a learning experience. Because
I agree. Yeah.
Because it takes both individuals to come to consensus.
It's just reaching a common ground.
Absolutely.
You need a common ground.
Absolutely.
And this is kind of the beauty of this process, because it's a consensus process. No one gets 100% of what he or she is asking for.
Yeah.
Like Tom and I would maybe have some disagreement, but we can always find.
Oh yeah, we had disagreements this past week. We did.
We had some disagreements. Right?
Yeah.
He didn't vote for me. I was like,
I know. I didn't vote for you, and I was like, oh my goodness.
We can always find a common ground.
And I'm sure you were saying the same thing about me on a couple items, but that's a part of the discussion, right? Yeah. We don't have to agree on everything, and we can vote our own opinions. And we can make sure that our voice is heard at the panel. And if you're not on the panel, your voice can still be heard by presenting. We saw how many presenters gave their opinions and they shared their knowledge with the code making panel.
This is the whole reason that NFPA spent a lot of time and putting a lot of effort in making sure that all the different stakeholders, all the different interest groups are represented on all committees, because you don't want code making panels, I should say, because the last thing you want is a code making panel dominated by an interest group, no matter what this interest group is, because now it's not a consensus standard.
That's right.
The standard will be written from one perspective, and this is not what NFPA, even you and I, everyone probably in this process does not want, because yes, I would like to get my ideas in the code or the things that I'm passionate to care about, but at the same time, if it's just me, then it would be my code and no one else would be. Like, you can just ask people to comply with something that was not agreed upon by all interest groups, like manufacturers, users, inspectors, installers, maintainers, labor, that's why if you go in every panel, there are different interest groups, and there's always a balance. No interest group is allowed to have more than 1/3 of the total vote of the committee. So to get anything that you propose, you need to obviously get 2/3. So even if your interest group is 1/3, you need another 1/3 at least to support you to make a change. That's the whole point.
Beautiful. Well, everybody, I hope you guys and gals got something out of our session today. And NEC 2026 is well underway. Today is actually Monday, and we will be sitting in Code Panel 4 is meeting, 1 is meeting, 6 is meeting, 8 or 7 is meeting, marinas, and 12 is still going, 14 is going. So a lot of the right people are here, and I wish all of you out there were here, because great learning experience.
I was gonna say it's a very beneficial learning experience, and we're not sure yet when the second draft meeting is going to be, but if it happens to be in your area, come and visit.
All right, thanks everybody for joining in. I thank you for taking the time out of your day to spend an hour and a half with Nehad and I. Thank you, Nehad.
Thank you, Tom, for the invite.
For taking your time out this evening.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. And remember, everybody out there, to Thank you for what you do for the electrical industry. Thank you for what you do
Thank
for
you.
the electrical
Thank you,
industry
Tom.
and for electrical safety. And remember to stay safe and please,
Stay healthy.
amen. See you next week, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.